You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, and marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter. We are founders and leaders of CIPR Communication. And Peter, we are lucky because we have one of our favorites joining us today.
Yes, yeah, it's a special episode today. We have a guest speaker, and Amber is joining us. So Amber, Christina, why don't you introduce Amber, since you were...
I was gonna say, who's Amber? But Amber Harding, she's with the Northern BC Tourism Association, and you are. I feel like we need to update your title, but you're marketing and communication specialist, aka all of the things.
All of the things.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me today. And yes, I do marketing and communications for Northern BC Tourism Association, and then also support on our destination development work as well. So kind of on both sides of the organization.
Nice. So maybe before we get into the topic, because some folks may not be familiar with the regional model. So could you give us a little bit of a kind of a synopsis of exactly what a regional DMO is and sort of how you function and operate?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we are one of 5 RDMOs, regional destination management organizations in the province of British Columbia. And so up here in Northern BC, we cover 60% of the province geographically. So what that looks like is from Prince George over to Prince Rupert, all along Highway 16, and then all the way up to the Yukon border. And then our region also includes Haida Gwaii. So we're a very large percentage of the province geographically, but don't have a huge percentage of the population. And as a regional DMO, we work really closely with the provincial government and Destination BC to basically advance the tourism sector throughout our region. So we do that through destination development work, so furthering our 10-year destination development strategies, travel trade and travel media. So outside of COVID times, bringing travel media and trade to Northern BC and promoting the region to them. And then through marketing. So we do a lot of content marketing with Destination BC and work with our DMO partners to market their communities and region to the consumer and traveler.
Nice.
So your key stakeholders become all of those communities that are within your region, right?
Yeah, so our stakeholders are a combination of the CDMOs, so community DMOs, municipalities, local municipalities in the north. We don't have a lot of traditional DMOs. So we work a lot with regional districts and local municipalities who have tourism as part of their portfolio. And then also the businesses. So we do still really represent and support the tourism businesses across the north as well.
Cool.
I never realized it was 60% of the, I want to call it the land mass, but it's true. You guys do cover this huge area.
Yeah. Our region is larger than the state of California. So it's,
oh my God,
it's a really big region in terms of, that's why when people, when we're developing itineraries and things like that, it's hard to, you can't go from the Northwest to the Northeast in one day or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So.
It reminds me of when Peter, your cousins from Poland, visited us and we said, well, what do you want to do? And then they said, oh, well, we'd like to see Niagara Falls. And we were like, oh no, there are so many provinces.
Yeah,
we'll cover a chunk here.
Yeah.
Amber, you worked with our team starting last year, but really you came to us around the value of tourism. And we worked with you on the idea of building templates and really a toolkit for your communities to use to talk value of tourism. So I guess my question for you, and maybe you know this answer a little bit, but what made you come to us? What made you kind of click and go, we need something here?
Yeah, so it actually came from just a few meetings with our communities last spring around this exact time a year ago, chatting with them about what kind of recovery they needed support, like what they needed support with in terms of recovering from COVID, in their marketing efforts and in their outreach efforts. And so they really did share with us that the value of this industry needs to be elevated more in our region. And so I was aware of the work that your team has done with value of tourism in other areas of the province. And so reached out to see what we could do. And our area is a little bit different because we're such a big region that includes many different communities. So it's not like we're trying to work within just one community to talk about the value of the industry to that community. It's figuring out a way to talk about the value of the industry across the region, but then also have it be able to be funneled down to individual communities. So I think it was after a few meetings with your team that we decided to create this toolkit that we could then supply to our stakeholders to allow them to tell their individual community story to their residents and local government.
Nice. So Peter and I talked a bit about kind of that CIPR toolkit approach, but I'd love to hear from you, like what you think worked about the toolkit, especially from that kind of regional DMO perspective. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was what was really great about the toolkit was we split it up into 4 separate updates. So we had the kickoff of value of tourism and then tools to support that. Then we moved into an education phase where it was all about just educating residents and local government on the value of tourism and talking about all the different ways that tourism impacts a local economy that aren't necessarily obvious right off the bat, like local auto mechanic shops can be impacted by tourism because tourists drive through and need to have work done on their vehicle sometimes, or the local coffee shop that's really seen as like a great place for locals to go and residents to go, but is also really quirky and different and a place that attracts visitors off the highway to come into the town center. So really that education piece. And then we also had a whole phase that we worked with your team on around polling and just understanding the value. So we empowered our communities to do surveying to their residents and to their stakeholders and just try to understand from their perspective where people were with the value. And then finally, once we kind of went through those phases, then it was really about communicating the value and going out with some more hard stats and saying, you know, this is the revenue that tourism brings to your community. And every community is different on how much of that information they have available, but we gave them tools to communicate that kind of depending on their different levels of information availability.
Nice. And in my experience, you know, when you come to a project like this, from our perspective and from your perspective, everybody sort of goes out and says, okay, this is in theory what we're going to do. And then you actually start putting pen to paper and then you start executing and you start learning things as you go, because, you know, every engagement like this is a pretty custom engagement. And so can you tell us a little bit about some, I guess, maybe key learnings, especially initially, and maybe some things that maybe didn't work as well, or things that we had to do to adapt to make them work better? Is there any insights you could provide there?
Yeah, what was really, I thought was really neat about this campaign was that it's totally like lived on for another year and it's still completely relevant. And so we did originally launch this last spring and we pushed it out to our communities and we chatted with them lots and gave them all the tools. And some of them went out and, you know, went through all the steps. Some of them just did some of the steps. And then it kind of just sat for almost a year. And we chatted earlier this spring and decided it was time to reinvigorate it. And the way we did it this time is we set up an email automation. So we actually had community stakeholders, whoever wants to really sign up for an email list. And then with the support of Christina and your team, we created, I think it was 10 or 12.
It felt like it just kept going at one point, but I think it's around there.
Around 10 to 12 weeks of weekly emails that would email, you know, a week from whenever the person signs up for the list, telling them, you know, here's your next step for this next week. And I do think that really helps because it's a lot of information. So if you just hand somebody this big toolkit, somebody who often what we find is people are doing tourism off the sides of their desk. And so it's overwhelming. And I think to like split it up into those like actionable steps, and every week they get like, okay, here's a breakdown of the tools for this week. Here's where they are with direct links to them. And here's how you can use them. The feedback we've gotten is that has been really helpful. Most communities aren't doing it every single week, but it's just having that reminder and those more digestible pieces coming to them on a weekly basis is helping them implement the toolkit a little bit more.
Nice. That's awesome.
I love that perspective too, because I feel like, Amber, we talked early on about value of tourism isn't just like a thing you do once. And I feel like this has allowed it to feel less like a campaign and more like that thing you need to build into your work every year.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And it's just something that I think slips through the cracks a lot because we're so focused in tourism on a lot of our development work and then a lot of our marketing work. So just trying to make sure consumers and visitors are aware and considering visiting our region. But I think that that advocacy and education of local government, elected officials, and local residents that aren't at all involved in the tourism industry is really, really important. Because I think it's also really important to tie in that tourism and making a place a nice place to visit also makes a place a nice place to live. So tourism and resident quality of life really go hand in hand. And that's something we've really tried to focus on with all of our value of tourism tools and education, is that it's not just about bringing an influx of visitors to your community. It's about actually making your community a more livable place. And then also supporting this valuable industry that does bring a lot of money into the community.
Yeah, I love that. And, you talked about destination development being part of what you do, but, that's obviously a very tourism centric word, but it's really community development, right? It's sort of how do you develop your community for your residents? And, by the way, this is going to be great for tourism as well. So I love the way you painted that. That's really how I think the world should be viewed. So good on you. My next question is just related to, the pandemic. We're sort of at a point now where, as we were chatting before we hit go here today, it looks like there's some great light at the end of the tunnel and the future is friendly. But how do you, from where you're sitting, see, I guess, what has happened and, things like tourism funding? Do you think that that's at risk? Do you think the models are going to change? How do you see the world sort of progressing as we get out of this pandemic? And how does the value of tourism work you did leading up to now help you in terms of, being prepared for what might be coming next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I do think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I also think we're looking at still a season of domestic travel. And it is going to take a while for international travel to ever resume to the levels it was. Something really fascinating that Destination Canada came out with, and it just really resonated with me, was they basically said, I might not get this exactly right, but go check it out on Destination Canada's website. They have the information, but I think it's if 2/3 of Canadians redirected their dollars that they would normally spend on international travel into a Canadian trip, it would infuse the Canadian economy with like $19 billion or something crazy like that. So I guess what I really took away from that is just the opportunities we have with the domestic market. And we really see that as a huge opportunity up here in Northern BC. We know that the majority of our visitors to Northern BC are other BC residents. So there is great opportunity to start driving some of our friends and neighbors in the Lower Mainland and the Okanagan up into Northern BC, and just dispersing them around the province a little bit more when recreational travel does open up in the next few weeks again. So I do see domestic travel as being a really big thing that we promote over the next, definitely this season and probably even next season as well. And I think the value of tourism work ties into that is just reminding residents how important it is to look in their own backyard and look around their own region. So, I shared earlier how huge that Northern BC is. So you can go on a pretty epic trip as a Northern BC resident to another part of Northern BC and still make it like a big vacation and see a totally different landscape and do totally different things than what you do in your own home community. So so I do think that is how the work ties together, is reminding people of the value of this industry, and the way that we support this industry is by spending our hard-earned money supporting the tourism industry in our own region, and then our own province, and then our own country. So I think that's really important.
Nice.
I love that example. We last year, once restrictions lifted a little bit during summer, took a trip to the shoe shop, and our kids thought, they asked me, are we in Mexico? Right. So, just that differing landscape, you don't have to travel far. And to your point, you're in a completely different place.
Well, and the great thing about something like Northern BC, I think to your point, is like literally there's like endless number of different landscapes and things to see. And I mean, it's like every day you could be somewhere different, doing something completely different and seeing something new. Right. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing. We're pretty blessed to be living where we are.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you, Amber, for joining us and sharing your toolkit experience. We love working with you, and I hope that I get up to Northern BC soon. It's been a while.
Yes, you guys have to come visit for sure. Hopefully in the next couple months, if things keep going the way they're going.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Remember, you can find Two Babies in a Business on Spotify and iTunes and Spreaker, and you can follow along on social media at CIPR Comms. But this episode actually wraps up our Value of Tourism series. And Peter, we're cooking up something really interesting for season 7. So if you have a question that you would like to ask Peter and I, whether it's about running a business together or marketing or comms, or maybe what we ate for
breakfast. Parents of twins, I don't know, whatever. It's going to be an open floor.
What we ate for breakfast, because I'm sure we could talk about that for 10 minutes.
Funny that you say that, but somebody asked me that today.
Oh. Well, there you go.
What do I eat? Because I've been on a fitness thing. But
anyways, send us your questions. You know where to find us, and we're going to spend the next series answering all of your wonderful inquiries.